Welcome to the Climate Summit Series. Today we hear from representatives of Verisk, which is a worldwide leader in data analytics that help their partners assess risk. Juliana and Roger, thank you for joining us today. Would you introduce yourselves and tell our Climate Summit participants a little bit about Verisk and the work it does?
Sure. Well, thanks, David. Thanks for having us. So my name is Roger Grenier. I'm a Senior Vice President with Verisk. And as you said, we're really an insurance-focused data and analytics company. So we serve the insurance industry with underwriting analytics, claims analytics, and extreme event modeling, which is where I sit in the business. So I'm with the team that develops catastrophe models. So I've been with Verisk for close to 17 years. And one of my responsibilities is overseeing the team of folks who work closely with clients in supporting their rate filings. And that team also supports regulators, including state departments of insurance and also the National Association of Insurance Commissioners. And our goal is really to help them understand the models and how they're used. And specifically as it relates to wildfire, over the last several years, we've been deeply involved in the discussion around wildfire risk and the use of models in California and more recently in other states as well. So I've presented to committees of the California House and Senate, and several of us have participated in public hearings to help educate legislators and the public about catastrophe models.
So, and my name's Juliana Anastasados. I'm a Senior Director of Wildfire with Verisk Underwriting Solutions. I'm relatively new to Verisk, but I've spent my 30-year career in the property and casualty industry as both an attorney and government relations professional. I managed the high wildfire risk states in the Western region while working for a large property and casualty insurance carrier. And in the course of that work, I developed a special interest and expertise in insurance issues related to the wildfire peril. At Verisk, I'm working with the teams in both underwriting solutions and extreme event solutions that develop Verisk's tools for assessing wildfire risk.
There's a lot of discussion in our communities relating to wildfire risk score and catastrophe rate models. What are these tools? How do they work? And how does your insurance company clients utilize them?
So I'll go ahead and start with the wildfire risk scoring tool. Verisk's tool is known as Fireline, and it's a tool that evaluates the wildfire exposure at a given location or address. So we use thousands of points of data based on well-established, scientifically verified risk factors like wildland vegetation, wind patterns, climate impacts, topography, and road access. And then we create a score that indicates the level of risk that a structure will burn if it is exposed to a wildfire. Our tools are really just one of many data elements that insurers will use in their risk selection, underwriting, and pricing process. So they might use them to determine first whether they even want to write a policy for a particular location. They might also use the score to establish a premium that accounts for the level of risk of a given location. But what's great about the Fireline tool is that it's very transparent and verifiable. Our customers and their customers are always able to see what factors contributed to their score and how they might be able to take actions to impact the score itself. It's also consistently applied from one location to another. Every location gets the same analysis of the risk of being impacted by a wildfire, which we also refer to as the burn propensity. Additionally, it's important to note that the data used to create the score is continuously refreshed so that we can create the most up-to-date score possible. Notably, Fireline is a tool that evaluates the propensity of a property to burn when there is a wildfire. It does not evaluate the likelihood or probability of a wildfire just starting. So that's the Fireline tool, and then I'll let Roger explain the Verisk wildfire catastrophe model.
Sure. Thanks, Juliana. So in a nutshell, insurers use catastrophe models to really manage their overall risk. So traditionally, insurers rely on historical claims experience, but for catastrophic events like wildfire, the claims information is usually insufficient. There's just not enough data to begin with because the events are rare. And the data that is available doesn't account for changes in things like development or other factors that change over time. So we augment the historical loss experience with a model, and that model simulates a collection of realistic events. So the simulations produce estimates for the cost of fires that could occur in a given year. So think of it as a hypothetical loss experience based on science and data that is used alongside the actual loss experience. So we rely on the same data that Juliana described. So we start with an objective assessment of the landscape and the propensity to burn. We include the vegetative fuels, the slope, road access, and we model the homes and the businesses in that environment. So for a simulated event, we first create an ignition, and then we physically simulate the effects of wind and weather, the fire spread, fire suppression, and the physical characteristics of the structures. And then we consider factors like multi-year cycles of rainfall and drought, and the impact that has on fuel loads, as we create a catalog containing millions of these synthetic events. So we include events similar to those that have occurred historically, but also those that have not yet occurred, but could occur in the environment that we have today. For each of these events, we calculate the damage, which creates a probability distribution that helps inform not only the premiums, but also the risk transfer strategies that insurers need to ensure that they have the capital necessary to pay claims. And I might also add here that catastrophe models are sometimes referred to as forward-looking, and that's true to an extent, but it's helpful to clarify what this means. So the models are intended to assess risk in what we call the near present climate. So the risk as it exists today and over the next few years. So we're not predicting wildfire activity, what will happen, and instead we're focused on what could happen under today's conditions and the trends that we expect over the next few years. So coming back to Fireline and the catastrophe models, so these are really complementary tools. While they use a lot of the same inputs, they do have different purposes and use cases. So Fireline, as Juliana said, is primarily used for identifying the risk of an individual property or to an individual property, whereas the catastrophe model helps insurers evaluate the overall risk. We think that by having access to these complementary tools, insurers have much better information than solely relying upon their historical data. So this helps them have more confidence in their wildfire risk assessment as they grow their business.
These models seem very complex. How can regulators and maybe even more importantly, the general public understand them?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we recognize that people need to understand these tools. And we should note that they are widely used and accepted by departments of insurance here in the US and in other places around the world. I mentioned the work that we do in educating regulators and the public, and included in that is extensive documentation that we make publicly available. So for the CAT models, these documents can run into hundreds of pages or more, and they provide detailed information on our methods, the data sources, and the model variables for all of the components of the model. We include a list of the peer-reviewed scientific papers, the technical reports, and all the other references that inform the model development. And Fireline makes similar information available. So yes, we agree that people really need to understand how these models work, and that's why we make this information available.
So these tools, they evaluate wildfire risk, and they allow insurance companies to develop strategies on how they will address the wildfire risk. Do these tools consider the property owner's risk mitigation efforts, like what is recommended by the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety? Also, do they consider community level mitigation efforts that are found in the National Fire Protection Association and FireWise community standards?
Yes, that's right. So the wildfire model considers the property and community level mitigation activities as you've described, as well as other factors like improved building codes that may not be reflected in the historical data. Really, the models are the vehicle through which these activities flow through to an insurer's risk management strategy. It allows insurers to take these improvements into account in pricing and portfolio composition, which really is what's needed to support a healthy market.
Yeah, and David, as for Fireline, these mitigation efforts are absolutely included. The current version of our Fireline tool considers both property level and community level mitigation efforts. In fact, Verisk has recently expanded its collaboration with the NFPA so that we can now provide wildfire risk and mitigation data from the NFPA's FireWise recognition program to 13 states in the Western US, including Washington. So now we have it built into our tool. information on whether a particular location is part of an FPA Firewise community. As for parcel and property level mitigations, you mentioned IBHS, and Verisk works very closely with IBHS to promote and study resilience efforts in wildfire and other perils. The Fireline tool currently accounts for various parcel level mitigations that IBHS recognizes in its Wildfire Prepared Home certification program. So for example, if a homeowner has done things like created a 5-foot non-combustible buffer around the home, or replaced their wood shake roof with a Class A rated roof like asphalt shingles or tile or slate or metal, or if they've installed double pane windows or metal ember resistant vents for their attic. These mitigations are all accounted for in the Fireline tool and will impact a wildfire risk score. And so we encourage homeowners to take a look at the IBHS Wildfire Prepared Home program, and then to discuss with their own insurance carrier how the carrier might consider these mitigations. But definitely the information about both property and community level mitigations can be input into the tool and will have an impact on the ultimate risk score.
Oh, that's great to hear. So Washington State has invested hundreds of millions of dollars into efforts to mitigate against wildfire risk. Our local Washington communities have also spent many resources to address the risk. Do these models update when you learn of these types of efforts? Is there anything the state of Washington can do to help keep your risk modelers better informed of the work that we're doing?
Yes, absolutely. So the key really is to collect good quality, verifiable data in a usable format. So those are the key ingredients in both the scoring tools and the modeling tools. So the tools update when we have data showing changes, and that could be changes from proactive wildfire mitigation efforts that you're describing, or even changes resulting from wildfire activity. So we absolutely want that data. We love good data, and we would welcome collaborating with the state on helping to define how to best incorporate this data and collect it and allow it to be usable in our models. And we're certainly accustomed to working with local and regional data sets. For example, we look at local building code adoption and building code enforcement, which can vary quite a lot from one jurisdiction to the next.
Right, and just kind of piggybacking on what Roger was saying, large-scale forest health mitigation efforts can absolutely impact both the parcel level scores and the model results. So we do want the most up-to-date and accurate information. And as an example of how Verisk is already partnering with local and state governmental and community groups on getting such data, we are currently working closely with some NFPA Firewise communities in other states to get updates on the community mitigation activities they've undertaken. And then we will be incorporating that information into our tools. And we think it's of utmost importance to get that information as soon as possible so the hard work and investments can be reflected in our tools.
You know, sometimes we live in our own little bubble here in Washington State. So I just want to ask, how do we stack up and compare against other Western US states in wildfire risk and efforts to mitigate it?
Yeah, David, it's a good question. And as it happens, Verisk has recently released our most current wildfire risk rating, or wildfire risk reports for a number of Western states, including Washington. So this is showing an example of some of the information that's available in these reports. This table here provides a high-level summary. So you can see, for example, that we identify for Washington, about 2% of the structures are in the highest risk zones. The map provides color-coded view of the risk. So here, the green areas are the lowest risks, which you can see include some of the most highly populated areas in the state. And these reports also highlight areas of recent construction and recent mitigation efforts. And we would encourage you to take a look at these reports for Washington and the other states. You can find these at verisk.com. Search for wildfire risk reports.
Thank you so much for your time. And in closing, if there's anything the state of Washington could focus on to help improve our risk assessment, what would it be?
Well, first, I want to just say thank you. We really appreciate you inviting us to speak about our tools, and we certainly welcome more conversation. As for what the state can do, we think the state's continued investment in forest health management and encouraging and providing grant funding for community and property level mitigation efforts is really important. And from there, sharing the data on such improvements with companies like Verisk will have a big impact on the wildfire risk and thus ultimately on your insurance consumers. And we just want to make it clear that you know, David, that Verisk definitely wants to be part of the wildfire risk solution in Washington.
Well, Julianne and Roger, thank you again for your time today.
You're welcome.
Thank you.